Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Starting Line. I'm your host, Sarah Allen. First omnibus finance bills were heard in committee. Now they're being heard on the House floor. A number of omnibus bills have been debated in the House chamber, including the Omnibus Jobs, Commerce, and Housing Finance Bill.
House File 729 is a complete change of course from what this body has been doing over the last 10 years.
And the Omnibus Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Finance Bill.
It funds the state agencies, it funds Bowser and the zoo.
No doubt we are just getting started with the Omnibus Bill floor debates.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to speak in support of the Hansen Amendment. Please vote yes.
This week's Starting Line looks at House File 793, a bill that would appropriate money for inner-city passenger high-speed rail projects. The original bill language had requested $26 million in appropriations. That amount was pared down to $15 million when it was included in House File 270, the House Bonding Bill. House File 793 will allow Minnesota to compete with other states that are pursuing grants from the federal government for inner-city passenger high-speed rail. The bill provides the necessary 20% state-local match required to secure funds so the Minnesota Department of Transportation can continue developing plans for providing rail access to new communities and improving the reliability, speed, and frequency of existing lines. Representative Mary Murphy sponsors House File 793. Murphy, a grounds manager and historical preservationist from Hermantown, is serving her 19th term in the Minnesota House of Representatives. She represents District 3B. Thank you, Representative Murphy, for joining us. To begin, why do you think high-speed rail is important for Minnesota?
It's being promoted by the federal government, and the population of Minnesota is growing. And we want to have different modes of transportation available to people all over the state. It's a new century, and we're going back to public transportation in masses.
Opponents of high-speed rail say they don't think enough passengers will use high-speed rail to cover the costs involved. Proponents see high-speed rail as a benefit to society, alleviating congested freeways, reducing car accidents, and lowering travelers' carbon footprint since it takes cars off the road.
The land is not available for wider and newer freeway kind of things. We can't continue to just depend on automobiles to get around.
Here's a breakdown of what is currently included in the proposed $15 million appropriation. $4 million for the Northern Lights Express route between the Twin Cities and Duluth, $4 million for the Rochester Zip Rail high-speed rail corridor between the Twin Cities and Rochester, $3 million for adding a second daily train from the Twin Cities to Chicago, $2 million for a high-speed rail corridor between the Twin Cities and Milwaukee, and $2 million for other corridor development and/or system projects.
Some people could travel in groups and have a good time on their way up. Some people could use this transportation for a sojourn to the city and do all their computer work while they were traveling rather than driving. It's a convenience for people and a choice for people. That's a good thing.
Thank you again, Representative Murphy, for joining us and shedding some light on your bill. Let's track House File 793 through the legislative process. It's had its introduction and first reading. The House Transportation Finance Committee gave the bill an informational hearing. Language from House File 793 has been included in House File 270, the House Bonding Bill, and the next major stop for the bonding bill is for it to be brought before the House for a floor debate. We have a starting line update. In mid-March, we featured House File 957, a bill that would ban school construction near former landfills and would require schools located near former landfills to notify parents. On Thursday, the bill's sponsor, Representative Bob Detmer, offered up House File 957 as an amendment to the Omnibus Education Finance Bill. Representative Paul Marquardt, the sponsor of the Omnibus Education Finance Bill, said the amendment needed more vetting.
I think there's just so many questions as to cost for notification.
Other concerns were raised by members, including DFLer Representative Frank Hornstein of Minneapolis, who said the bill didn't go far enough in protecting students from hazards because it is limited to landfills.
I think there's all sorts of other issues that ought to be addressed in your amendment that aren't.
My thoughts, if we got this in the statute, then we could add some of these other things that Representative Hornstein had brought up.
Representative Detmer did not have the support needed to amend the omnibus bill, so he withdrew his amendment. Representative David Dill, chair of the House Environment and Natural Resources Policy Committee, has promised to take up House File 957 next year.
I hope that people here in the committee, and as we go forward next session, that we really take this up and think seriously about our schools. We talk about safe environments for our schools, but how much do we really know about the soils and the things that are next to our schools?
You can learn more about this bill and other bills through our online news service, Session Daily. This nonpartisan news source employs a staff of professional writers, editors, and photographers that provide you with in-depth coverage of the Minnesota House of Representatives. You can also watch live coverage of committee and floor action on House TV. To see past bills featured on Starting Line, go to www.youtube.com/MNHouseInfo and click on the Starting Line playlist. Coming up next week, Starting Line will feature a different bill and look to see if there's been any movement on the House bonding bill or other bills we have highlighted.
And remember, thousands of bills get introduced every legislative session in Minnesota. All of them first have to cross the starting line.